All right. Well, thank you, Dennis. And if you're looking up to me, that is actually putting you on a very dangerous path. But I digress. As everybody knows, my name is June Casalmir. My pronouns are she, her, and she, her, and hers. I am brown skin, longish hair that I cut myself, and I'm wearing a maroon dress that unfortunately does not have pockets today. And so thank you all for joining. And so for clarification, the Fortune 50 in the title is somewhat arbitrary because we're really talking about large-ish companies. And frankly, the Fortune 50 kind of moves around a lot, frankly, because of revenue changes. And as you can expect, there has been a lot of change this past year. But basically what I mean are companies that have double to triple digit billions in revenue and have frankly, a diverse source of revenue. So take Amazon, for example. Their big behemoth source of revenue is, of course, their online sales with about 220 annual, but they still make 80 billion from AWS, Amazon Web Services. And so more importantly, Fortune 50 companies like Amazon and like Verizon have large departments that are large and somewhat complex. Now, the amount of revenue doesn't necessarily correlate to the actual size and complexity of the department. Insurers and banks, of course, will have, because they're highly regulated, may actually have larger, teams than, say, a digital tech or digital services company. So like Dennis had said, what I'd like to do today is give you a sense of what it's like working in a large department that's part of a larger organization. So regardless of whether you do legal work for a client or you want to do work for a client that fits the description or are considering joining one, I hope that you find today insightful, and of course, feel free to use the chat. Dennis and Jill are monitoring it, and I might take a look myself. And again, I know thank you all for joining and you all for joining and inspiring me as well. With that being said, like all in-house lawyers, I have one client, so have to provide the standard disclosures that this is my personal view. And actually, it's not just my personal view, it's a summary and an amalgam of different experiences that I've gleaned from talking to others as well that work for similarly situated companies. All right, so I would like to start off with a little story about something that I dealt with in my previous role, leading support for Verizon's retail organization. And that's the question of should retailers prohibit open carry in their stores? So notice that this question is should and not can. Now, the answer to the question of can is one that I, as the legal stakeholder and working with our sales teams and our physical security teams, was responsible for answering. The answer to that is, sorry, I'm moving my cursor around to change things. Puts it, okay, the answer to that question is yes. If you honor the requirements in each state of the patchwork legal landscape. But the should answer, the should question is actually a little bit more complex, and it requires an assessment of impacts on the business. Now, of course, as if you know Verizon and you know, frankly, all the telecommunications company, you know that we don't just provide wireless and wireline services to consumers, but it's also we have we serve like public sector as well. So you might think that that's one consideration that I'm talking about. But the other business impact is the significance of the role that our own retail employees actually have to play. So if they are put in the position of having to sell devices, provide service to devices, but also answering the question of whether or not clarifying the policies of open carry of firearms in stores, then that actually puts them in kind of a difficult situation. They're not lawyers and they're not security either. So it actually, when in evaluating it, a lot of retailers and Verizon do consider that particular concern. The other factor to look at is the social landscape at the time. And my friend Dan, who's our chief security officer, had done research before we had discussed this with our sales leadership. And one of the things that he pointed out was, hey, the largest percentage of purchases in 2021, which is when right in the middle of the pandemic, by the way, was first-time gun owners who may not necessarily actually understand those the policies of stores and what's required as far as whether or not a retailer can can prohibit firearms in stores. And then finally, the safety of our employees, which, you think, hey, if you prohibit open carry in stores, then that means no one brings the guns in stores. Well, we found that is not necessarily the case. We actually had found people, we've studied and we talked to a bunch of retailers that had said, hey, if we instituted this policy and it actually created more divisiveness in the stores. Keep in mind that when we, in the last couple of the years, when this topic has come up, it actually has overlapped with the institution of mask mandates in stores as well. So the retail environments are very, have been very, very, very challenged as well. And so you put this overlay on top of it, and it can be very complex. So the question that is fundamental to this, the one that I'm trying to help you, I'll help you understand, is which of all of these factors is the responsibility of a legal leader? And the answer, of course, is all of these, because as somebody who's working in a department, you distinguish yourself by understanding all of the factors and not just the legal factors that are at play. So there's an old adage. I don't know if you've ever, if you're thinking about going in-house, but a lot of folks in-house, whether it's large or small, will say, oh, hey, when you go in-house, you actually have to wear many hats. You're a counselor, you're a business person, you're a manager of people a lot of times. And actually one client, when I flew out to Charlotte to do some marketing counseling in a previous job, one of my clients there actually likened me to a priest in a confessional, where he could go in and kind of confess all of his sins and ask for absolution from me. Well, that's, I did give him his novenas to say, which was basically, hey, correct all your advertising and don't make unsubstantiated claims, which I think Kaylin could actually understand. Then that was, in many ways, that's actually true. So it's not just the hats. It's actually feeling like you inhabit multiple persona on a daily basis working in a large company. So in fact, today I was on early with peers from Singapore and Brussels, and they have a completely different taxonomy of an alphabet soup of different regulatory entity names than the discussion that I had, which was legal peers and the acronyms for the business that they had to choose. So when you're talking about those different things and two different audiences, you actually have to switch. And sometimes it does really feel like a little bit of whiplash, but like Alice, sometimes coming to work or sitting down on your computer to work feels like going down the rabbit hole. And yes, I do have colleagues like the enigmatic Cheshire Cat, the frantic white rabbit. I won't tell you yes or no if I have a colleague that is like the Queen of Hearts or the King of Hearts for that matter. That's for a different story. But to that end, like Alice, I do need to adapt quickly in order to navigate through. All right, so a little bit about large departments. They have the a Fortune 450 company has multiple business lines and business organizations. So within the legal department, you will find divisional leadership. You could actually have a divisional GC who's responsible for a subsidiary that reports up to a deputy GC that's responsible for a larger amalgam or group of subsidiaries or a larger product line. And then the deputy GC, you might have someone who's a deputy GC for a smaller subsidiary. So there's a lot of management. And so what a large department, the leadership of a large department and those within it will have to balance is according flexibility for those folks that have that divisional leadership to make their own independent decisions, while at the same time meeting the needs, like the larger compliance and legal needs of the larger organization. Second, we have to sync with the larger enterprise. So all policies, whether they're HR, sourcing, and PR, apply. Just a hint: if you're applying for a large company for an in-house role, don't just send it to someone you know. Actually, send the application through the HR system, because the HR system, like the hiring process, actually will a lot of times, for the most part, I don't know of one place where it goes through and it's reviewed by the manager before HR. HR will usually approve it first. So that plus sourcing. Outside, sometimes, when we're considering outside counsel, sometimes it will take a while to go through conflict checks because there are a lot of them. And then it also has to be resolved a lot of times with our existing sourcing guidelines. PR is actually one. And in fact, today before as I was actually preparing to present to you all, even though it's actually it's about I'm presenting to a dozen of my friends. I actually did have to have it approved by our compliance team, and it actually had to comply with our code of conduct, which actually has specific requirements associated with speaking publicly, even if it's not about the subject matter of our business still, because the Verizon name, in many ways, while I don't represent, while these aren't Verizon's views, I do, put myself out there as an employee of the company. And then in addition to that, something that a lot of people people don't that is interesting, I think, for people to know, is that we actually insource a lot of our legal expertise, things that would have normally sent out to outside counsel, things like discovery and specialized advisory skills are now standard in-house functions. So, for example, on antitrust matters, a lot of times for third-party discovery, I myself and my very skilled colleague Anjali and my other skilled colleague Jen will actually handle it ourselves along with our litigation team. You'll see, and it's the same with copyright and trademark teams. I think for copyright and trademark and a lot of patent functions, it's actually good to be in-house because you have that immediate connection with the business. Ryan, we've talked about this a lot in our class when it comes to, to smaller companies, but it also applies for larger companies as well. I personally want to shout out our federal regulatory team. They have, I would like to say, the most astute, knowledgeable base of experience with the FCC that I've ever seen. Not only that, but an acumen when it comes to actually working with the staff themselves. So we actually, we're very hands-on. The other thing to note is process maturity. Take, for example, the decision to that is happening across legal departments right now, which is how can we best utilize AI for purposes of reviewing contracts, or how can we use whether it's generative AI or other forms of GI decision-making AI, that actually goes through that is going through a very mature process where we assess global clearance considerations, utility, potential security risks, things like that. You'll see a lot of very mature legal operations organizations built within companies, not just like Verizon, but I would say banks as well will have them. And then things like preferred firm RFPs are ones that are and internal project ones are processes that we have. So, what does it take to succeed as an in-house attorney? Well, I don't know that I've necessarily succeeded per se, but what I do know is that in order to actually support the business, being a stakeholder, being a business stakeholder is probably the best advice that I can provide. You want, what I like to say is that your value is accretive to the business. It should add on to it and enhance the work that the business does. And particularly in the legal role, your specific value that you add should be discernible. So in other words, you build your personal brand based on how much value you can bring to the organization. And so an example that I like to give is in many, it would be one thing for me if someone, and Caitlin, not gonna pick on you, but I'm gonna pick on advertising and marketing because that's where I came from originally in-house. But I could say, if someone comes to me with an advertising claim and they want to say if it's approved, I can say, yes, it's approved. No, it's not approved. And then that might be okay. But what I like to do is I like to share my knowledge. I would like to say, hey, it is approved, or it's not approved in the way that you phrase it because we need more support for the claim that it's the fastest network, for example, or the most beneficial or the highest speeds. We need more data to support that. And then maybe I'll go further and say, well, this, you need your data set needs to be fairly large. Your margin of error needs to be X, Y, and Z. I could even get as granular as that, but I can also provide high level concepts. That way, when I shift that knowledge and when I shift that ownership of compliance to the client, when they come back to me over time, they will have a better claim that it incorporates all those learnings with them. And that makes our go-to-market processes and the legal approval processes easier. So what are the roles? I think the ways, the buckets of types of roles. We went back to to playing, I talked a little bit earlier about playing different roles. One of your fundamental roles as in-house, particularly in a large department, is a navigator. So you like to identify the legal parameters, the guidelines. A lot of times we talk about guardrails a lot. I think that's a useful concept. You try and strive, and like that example that I provided, you strive to make sense of them. Again, you could push, I could say the claim's not substantiated, but that may not, that may go in one ear and out the other because it is in many ways. And it sounds very legalese to them, so that's a legal concept. But if you say it's not supported, the evidence doesn't support the claim, or you provide ways to support it, then that's steering them more towards a compliant outcome. Secondly, you're a student to the business. I think this is one of the areas that I think in-house attorneys and large departments do generally need to work on. And a lot of times this is something that I need to work on for myself. And this is actually why I changed roles a couple of years ago, because I wanted to learn more. I think especially if you look at the Fortune 50, Fortune 100, you see that the companies actually have varied lines of business. Verizon just doesn't offer wireless or service or Fios. It actually does. We do on the business side. We offer and bundle professional services. We work with systems integrators. We have some interesting plays, partnerships. with companies like Microsoft and Sony as well. And so and frankly, every company has to innovate. So you have different lines of business. And so when you're in-house in a large, complex company, take advantage of that opportunity to learn different lines of business. What is the play for, what is Verizon's interest in gaming, or different types of communication, what's their interest in Internet of Things, how, and even that, everything from that to how does a wireless network actually work, what is backhaul, all those things that you take advantage of when you work for a large company. My GC, Vandana Venkatesh, actually, a lot of times she likes to say that lawyers are often the smartest people in the room. And it's not just because we know where all the bodies are buried, but the further you work and the more of the more you are ingrained in the business, but you also know who the people are, the best strategies for business, and you also have different instances. You can also be in a better position to provide different solutions. And then finally, it goes without saying, you're not a roadblock. You might be a speed bump. You might be a very big speed bump of different sizes, small, large, depending on the situation, depending on the client, but you don't stand in their way completely. A lot of times you reserve your no for the most significant of situations. There have been times when I've said no, but those were ones those are ones where it necessitated a call at 10 o'clock at midnight to my senior VP. But I don't say no a lot. That sounds really weird to say, but I say not at this, not in this fashion. And then I steer them to the direction if I have to. So that's, reserve your no. All right. Everybody, so success is kind of, I think success means different things to different people. I think especially now across different aspects of the profession. Especially after COVID, I think people are starting to define success differently. And so when you talk about identifying success in the in-house context, maybe the concept of Occam's razor applies here. And that's, if the simplest answer to the question of identifying success is, title and money, right? Well, here's one, but I know honestly, there's some truth to that. I could use more money. We could all use a little bit more money. But at the same time, I don't think we should discount other measures of success, because salary or money will be based on market and industry. And title, as we've mentioned, isn't necessarily indicative of influence. So one way that you could, that you can tell that what you're doing is working is whether or not you have a large amount of span or control. Not necessarily title, not necessarily level of management authority, but I do know a lot of individual contributors that have that are leading significant revenue generating or strategic matters. And if I can list them at least 5 or 10 in my head just in Verizon, and they're all amazing individuals. You're learning something new every day. A lot of times you don't stay in your area. I think this is my fifth role in Verizon. But even within those different roles, sometimes you are assigned matters completely outside of your comfort zone. And that means people are banking on your talent and they see something in you. And then a third indicator is that people are talking about you. Not necessarily gossiping, but a lot of times you'll join a call and people will be like, oh, we were just talking about you. And it always like it's always a good thing. And in fact, I actually sent a note to one of my mentors saying that I was just talking about her with someone else. And it was actually a really nice thing to do. But when someone says, we're talking about you, means they're either recommending you as a mentor or a mentee, or they're recommending you for work. I think just a quick caveat is being top of mind doesn't mean like pulling all the accolades to yourself, saying I did this or I did that. It's actually sharing the work and sharing accolades, because I think it's better to be known as someone who is not only transparent, but who is like someone that you want to work with, that shares success equally. Just makes sense and actually makes work go by, makes the organization, particularly a large organization, run more efficiently. And like it or not, if you have a full inbox, then I view that as a means of success, because that means you're the go-to person. Now, some of the stuff that's in my inbox aren't antitrust issues. They're not transactional issues. I will send those along if I have like an opinion, because I have strong opinions, even though it's not my area. I might give them, but a full inbox means, hey, people are, like, know not only that you are like they know that you know it, or they know that you know someone who knows it and can take care of the situation easily. So I promised you that I would talk a little bit about my life, but it's really hard because no day is the same. Again, this is my 5th role. I'm doing antitrust and strategic transactions. So half my job is basically advising teams on antitrust issues. And then the other half is working with our strategy team to negotiate contracts with partners, sometimes in the tech space, and sometimes other partners like gaming and gaming entities as well. So to that end, I could be analyzing terms, court decisions, distribution proposals, and presentations. We actually do review a lot of presentations. When I was preparing for this, Joe asked me, she's like, hey, are you comfortable using PowerPoint? And I think, as Ryan knows, yeah, I live in PowerPoint, not only inside and outside of my job, but yeah, PowerPoint is in my wheelhouse. I might respond to a DOJ or Federal Trade Commission inquiry. Being in a large company actually means also being a citizen of the corporation. So one of the ways you actually can get can make yourself not only visible, but get good mentors and sponsors is to pitch in. So sometimes I'll be on committee meetings, diversity committees or steering committee meetings. And we've been having, especially since COVID, a lot of mentorship or peer catch-up calls. I was talking to one of my colleagues earlier today just to see how she's doing, and actually to help figure out for her help her navigate the best pathway for her career as well. And then, of course, team or staff calls. There's a lot going on today in the antitrust world. So a lot of today is actually going to be analyzing and forwarding business regulatory updates. We'll send these to our clients and other teams that we work on. For example, our mergers and acquisition team will hear from us on some of the developments today. Strategy calls, like I had mentioned, and then sometimes outside counsel oversight, reviewing bills, staffing matters. Again, always looking for good antitrust counsel and actually transactional counsel as well. And then leadership development programs. I think one of the things that's really great about working in a large department is that you can take advantage of some of the programs that they have. So we've brought in quite like a lot of vendors that like will put on leadership development programs for the larger company. And so when you get to participate in one of them, you actually also get to meet different leaders and peers from across the company and learn about their business, and frankly challenges being a leader there as well. And then of course, like I had mentioned, a strategic negotiation. So so a lot of times people, when I say I'm in-house, they're like, oh, that must be really easy, 9-to-5 job, right? You don't have to bill hours. And the answer to that is, yes, but no. So a lot of times I will be, especially at the beginning of the in my previous job leading retail support, we would have a lot of calls March 2020, where they wanted to know. They're like, oh, the police are here. They barricaded our doors. What do we do, June? And so we had to answer the question on how to deal with them. And sometimes we had to say, well, unfortunately, you can't open. That was actually one of our stores, like one of our flagship stores. I actually there was so we sometimes in these conversations we're having, I was having these conversations across time zones during the beginning of the pandemic, because the laws, as you all know, were very all over the place. So we had to navigate those, but they needed those answers right away. Now you do have control over your time. And it's not, and not in the 9-to-5 way, but I had heard someone characterized it this way, and I think it's really accurate. If you've got visibility on a particular project, you can see the timelines for those projects. And so when you might need to be closing a negotiation. You might know when you're shipping product. You might know when there's a significant regulatory deadline. And so you can actually structure your time accordingly. You can front load some of the support. You can phone a friend, get someone to help you to tag team. I feel like I'm bringing a lot of 80s and 90s references to this discussion. But that doesn't necessarily, and then on top of that, when you come in-house, you usually have 5 to 6 years experience. Some that can be lower, but usually you have a lot of experience under your belt. And so you know the law. So a lot of times your assessment and so your judgment will not be based on research, but will based on your knowledge and your ability to apply things. So you will have to exercise judgment pretty quickly in the in-house context, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you don't work. Weekends can sometimes be fair game, particularly for large projects, and then a lot of times things have significant financial impacts because and you might be working on teams with other lawyers, and you have the ability to share, to have conversations and vet things. But at the end of the day, sometimes it can mean significant impacts. Big companies have large pockets, so a lot. To be fair, we're I think like other companies, we are definitely targets for things for class actions, consumer class action, among other things. All right, let's see. Comments, yeah, and also, by the way, feel free, if you have any comments and questions, to put them in the chat, because I have saved some time at the end for questions and discussions. And I also just want to say hi to everyone. All right, so very quickly, if you're thinking about going in-house, here's kind of my roadmap for every stage. You want to, as you first join the department, processes and relationships. And by the way, if you work at a company where there's a chief of staff for different functions, get to know that person, be that person's BFF, because the chief of staff is actually the gatekeeper, the translator, and the ear whisperer for the executive that they support. And so if you need time, if you need that leader to actually deliver a strong compliance message, your chief of staff is your go-to person. So learn those relationships. Risk assessment is a skill that you should learn from the get-go, and then, like I had mentioned before, start learning the different business models. You also should start after that being visible as the person who is the expert, the go-to person for I don't know, a subject, not necessarily, it can be subject matter expertise, but it also can be knowledge of a particular line of business. And then start to forge even better client relationships. And then you start showing your practical business sense. My colleague Gabrielle used the term bias towards action, and I think that is probably one of the most defining characteristics. And I think for those of you that have worked with me on and follow things, I think it manifests itself as impatience. so that might be a reason why, because I'm I feel like I'm on the clock. We have KPIs, timelines to meet, and so I think I've been encoded with the bias towards action. And here's where you should start leading projects as well. Walk the walk, be the business person, and make your footfall heard. What they say about promotion in other contexts is especially true in the in-house context. They get promotional and leadership opportunities are given to those who act like leaders already. And then as you start, when you do become either a functional or formal leader or both, continue to build your leadership brand and continue to be an asset to the business that helps to get things done. And then if you make it to GC, you be someone that you're actually, one of the things they look for in GCs is that they're valued for their business acumen and relentless pursuit of organizational excellence. The GCs that you see today at the helms of large organizations are ones that don't just sit there and accept what they're given, but they try and make their organizations better, whether it means internal project management, how they view the relationship with outside counsel, who they staff, and so they're constantly looking to improve. All right, I'm going to just kind of some things, just a random hodgepodge of tips that didn't fit anywhere else. Titles vary. We talked about that before. You can actually have a mix of generalists and subject matter experts, highly regulated industries, insurance, telecom, finance, some of pharmaceutical companies will have a generalists that are devoted to the business, as well as very skilled subject matter experts, both in FDA policies and patent. And then promotion is not rote. I think it's a combination of luck, visibility, and frankly, what the client wants. But having a strong brand will help get you there. It also helps unlock efficiency. Once you're known as the go-to person, then people will come to you, and you can help them address their business issues efficiently. And finally, one of the things that I've learned is that I spend a lot of my time not necessarily directing traffic, but actually finding who has the answer to the questions that I have or that other people have. So I could actually spend a lot of my day trying to figure out who has documents, who has the right documents, who has the expertise, not just in the department, but on the client side as well. And if you think of a company that has 50,000 employees, you could easily spend an entire week trying to answer those questions. So, so I think who is, I would say, I'd like to, if I could change this. I could say who is, instead of who is often the first question, who is often the first and only question that you might be asking throughout an entire day, because a lot of times it's hunting down information. So that's it for me. I know I've left some time for questions. All right, so I have one. Dennis and Jill, I can just start with Kaylin's question, which is, when working with outside counsel, what is helpful for us to provide you along with the risk assessment? This is actually a really interesting one, and I think as outside counsel, you are the best suited to to balance this. But we're also interested in examples of solutions that you may have encountered for other clients. Now, you don't have to tell us who those clients are, but something like this has worked out for example, this solution has worked out very well for this client or that client. Kaylin, we've talked about the fact that your firm has really great attorneys that can actually help very well with the risk assessment, something that's probably okay. Other additional value add factors to consider, and the likelihood that those additional factors to consider will make the difference, I think, as a good is incredibly helpful. Did that answer some of the questions that you had? Okay, all right. And then, okay, what else? Ryan says, how does performance evaluation for in-house counsel differ from working at a firm? Okay, so I think firms really do, of course, there's a billable hour requirement of course. And then I think for us, for performance evaluation, we do a lot of there's a component for building it. Definitely, from my preference, I have one that's related to building relationships with clients, right? So how I support that. I'm getting back to Kaylin's question about risk assessment, how proactive I've been in providing those solutions, how skilled I am at navigating those, and how efficiently, right? So how it's odd, because how little, how quickly, as opposed to how much time I can bill, is a significant is actually viewed very, very, very quickly. And then how proactive. Right. So if you are actually not, I don't say chasing down, but if you are looking for solutions, for example, if you think something needs to exist, you make it. You actually make it. You are proactive, and you make it exist. I don't know the better way to say it, right? But because I think you have the opportunity and the resources and the scale within a larger company to do that. So, right. Anything else? Before we have a few more minutes, I think. Maybe a couple minutes. Does anyone want to go off of mute and ask another question? No.
Hey, June. This is Dennis. I have a question.
Okay.
How do, as in-house counsel, in anticipation of any potential litigation ever down the road, how do you think about or go about advising your client on just good email practices in case anything is discoverable or anything like that? Or do you worry about that in your
Yeah.
role right
Oh,
now?
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, we do. I'm trying to, because I have it like a specific. I'm trying to think of the translation. So we'll do if we think there's, and I think we actually interpret in anticipation of litigation very broadly, right? So and it's in a case, and it is case by case, right? So if there's something, and it's not the I would say it's not, hey, we think something bad has happened, right? We don't institute a document hold there right away, and we don't say change your, your practices. Ordinarily, so what we actually do, we have an existing compliance program, and we actually do train on what we like to call document hygiene on an annual basis. So that actually like that factor is part of is baked into our compliance processes as a regular matter. We do document retention. We actually have scheduled document cleanup days. I like when I talk about it, the more I talk about it, I'm like I hope that it is we have a document retention schedules that we keep to and that we make sure that that people are honoring. And then if there's, and then when it comes to like the potential of of litigation, a lot of times actually when outside counsel comes to us, or if we engage them, we've already identified a hold list for example. So Dennis, we're on it. I don't know if that necessarily answers your question either, but we do we have, we work really pretty closely with our litigation team.
No, that's helpful. I was also just thinking about just in the regular course of business, if being proactive in preventing bad records from being created, like the types of things you would write in an email versus,
Yeah. So actually that's interesting. So we'll do that on a general level. So we'll do to going to what I had previously mentioned. So we'll have compliance training about document practices in general, right? So don't say, that like, and that's both retention policies as well as like just general how you communicate as a business person. And then definitely for antitrust, and I know it's the same for different practice groups. We will prioritize certain business groups that might actually have that might be talking to others in our industry. For example, if we're working with our government affairs team that meets regularly with other carriers through CTIA, we will meet with them like separately and say, just to make clear about their like what they can and can't say in the conversations. If they think that if they think that how to act, if they think that there's conversations that are not necessarily appropriate that are happening, how they make their noisy exits, for example, in order to prevent antitrust issues. And so like you will, like, I think because, and getting back to the point of generalists and SMEs, we will work closely with the line of business and the product attorneys that are closest to those business units, like those divisional GCs, to kind of figure out how to customize those practices for each business unit as well.
And does that type of communication, like training or monitoring, become more complicated with increased use of other forms of communication like Teams and Slack?
Yeah. This is, and in fact, actually, there is an existing discovery fight in one of the Google antitrust cases that relates to text messages, and that actually relates to their document retention policies relating, I forget if it's text or Slack, but I think definitely the advent of Slack has been an enterprise-wide use for platforms like that have actually made the document retention and the communication process, and advising it more complicated for sure.
Any last questions before we close out? We have a few minutes left.
Thank you, everyone, for supporting. It's good to see everyone's faces. I can't wait to see you all, hopefully in person soon. Okay.
Great. And thank you so much, June, for taking the time to share with us your insights and your experiences as well. So I know that this was extremely valuable. Really appreciate it. Thanks.
Great. Thanks, everyone.